So looking at your skins and stuff here, the first thing that I'm going to say right off the bat is, let me just delete some of these things here. So the first and foremost thing that I was going to say right off the bat is the shoulder is out of place and needs to be adjusted. And it's actually pretty simple. I know you're following the photo reference. I would say it goes something like that. But what you want to do is when you're painting, um, as a general rule, using bleached out photographs like you did with the white backgrounds generally doesn't give you the value resource that you really want to go for. And if I were going to do something like this, what I would actually do is I would actually copy this and multiply it, and it's going to give you the much greater value tones. And I think that's really where you wanted to go with your aspect of better, more contrast and things like that. And then from there, you can actually go in and kind of fade out that edge. If you want that edge faded out, like right now it's a hard edge that's blended out. But if you want that edge faded out, I would just use a brush with a light version, something like this, and I have the hardness all the way down. And simply by pulling those colors out, that's where you're going to get that hidden edge that you want to really kind of get rid of. So that being said, if you're doing a painterly texture, I think you did a pretty decent job. One of the things that I would say is, if you look at the photo reference, the photo reference itself actually has a lot of skin definition in the shadows. So by doing that, I think what you want to do is you want to create like more pore value system. And to be honest with you, what I use for my pores is, it's just a custom brush I made. It's, as you can kind of see from the outline, it's let me just layer this, and just it's just a very simple dot pattern system. And then what I do is actually give me a little spacing, go in your shape dynamics, and I turn my angle jitter so it rotates that. And then what you want to do is you can actually change your skew on that by adding a little bit of roundness jitter, and if you want some size jitter too. And what you're going to do is, of course, smaller pixels. And you can just start by taking some of the saturated colors and start in the blending areas. Just add that pixelated pore look. Don't do it super dark. Don't pick the dark, and because in the darks your shadow goes out. But if you start doing it outside of the shadows, like I'm going to grab this color here, and I'll zoom up so you can see. So I'm going to grab this color, like this darker color, and I'm going to just start kind of going back and forth like so. And it's going to give it a little bit more pixelated, noisy look. And I think that's what you want to go for as far as when you get your pores and stuff like that. The next thing you want to do is you always want to grab the highlights, because you have the shadows and then you have that highlights. And so as you can see, it's very subtle. You don't want to make it the whole brush like that, but adding that texture, and then you can even lower the quality a little bit, the opacity on it, and that adds a little bit more noise. I know a lot of artists, what they do instead of that is they give it a photograph look. So what they'll do is they'll pick a mid-tone gray and fill that foreground, and then go into their filters and add noise. And what they do is they usually just do a crazy amount of noise, something like that, and then they add that as kind of an overlay, but then they lower the opacity on it, and that noise adds a little bit more character and texture to the skin itself. However, the problem with that I've always found is if you do it on everything, it gives you kind of that rough look on everything. I know a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll flatten layer after layer and paint over and flatten and continue to do it. Just depends on your style and your technique. If you're going for more painterly, then this isn't really what you want to go for. But otherwise, I think you did a solid job on the kind of that work. I would just put a little bit more detail into the eyes itself, um, and I would also go a little bit stronger on the lips as far as the details goes. Kind of watch your lip, and this is just a side note. Um, when you do your lips, and I'm just going to kind of go over the noise here. And so when you do your lips, watch out if you get that overhang like you have here. And I'm going to show you real quickly. So like you've got this overhang here, and what's happening is I think you wanted to push out your lip a little bit more, but that's too much of an overhang. Generally, what happens is if you kind of pay attention, the nose and the lips a lot of times will do the same thing. So if the angle of the nose and the lips are something like this, it would be kind of pretty close to it. And it's just a lot of people have that feature. If you can always put bigger lips, smaller lips. But I think changing your lips, grabbing it over to see more of the background, and then bringing it out, and probably putting a little bit more chin on her. Not by much, but it's just a hair. I think is going to really push out that jawline and kind of make it much more interesting. The other thing too is watch out for your subtle tones, and what I mean by that is in your original. I'm going to go back here. So in your original, you've got that bleached out look here, but you're kind of missing why that bleached out look is there. So what I mean by that is looking at the reference. Um, looking at the reference, what you actually have is kind of this collarbone going on here, and then the collarbone picks up a highlight right there. And while that's not the way you wanted to, you wanted more skin tones, but that's kind of why this feels odd to me. In all reality, this feels odd because there's no definition in the collarbone. This one here has the definition. So when I go here, especially, this has your definition of your collarbone, but here you're lacking that location of the collarbone. And so even just putting, just a highlight here makes a huge difference. So that's something that I would tell you to do right off the bat. But otherwise, like I would. The other thing too is keep some hard edges, like the back of the neck. Like I said, I blurred out the shoulder because it's more foreground, background. But also be aware of your highlights. And then one of the guys made a comment about the background. Never start on a white background. It's preference. I know a lot of people who do it. A lot of people don't. I always start on a mid-tone gray, and that just gives me a better color range because I'm not blinded by the white light. So I hope that helps.